What's up, YouTube? This is Big Mike, aka Too Raw for TV. And in today's NBA, it can be argued that most of the superstars or all-stars, or superstars and all-stars of today are all pretty much in their primes. Of course, there's some guys who are obviously not in their primes anymore. Like, for instance, a Carmelo Anthony and a Dwayne Wade. Dirk Nowitzki's way out of it. Matter of fact, Dirk's best years were probably before 2013 and 14. Vince Carter, his best years were probably before it even started this decade. That's how long he's been in the league. So then you have some guys who are finally in the downside of their careers, like a Chris Paul. I think LeBron James is in the downside of his career. Although LeBron James is still arguably the best player in the league, but he's much closer to the pack than he was, say, back in 2012, 13, and 14. But other than that, most of the other guys are the fledgling stars or current stars, all in their 20s or very, very early 30s. They're all like in their primes. But there was a time in the NBA where you can make the argument that the old men of the league, guys who were in their mid to even late 30s, ruled the NBA. And that would be in the late 1990s. I'd say from like around 1996 to 1998. Or really, 1995 to 1998. During that 3-year period, the league was ruled by the quote-unquote elderly, the old men of the league. The best teams, the Chicago Bulls. 1998, you had Michael Jordan, who was 35 years old, which is very old for a shooting guard. Scottie Pippen was 33 years old, getting up there in years for a small forward, known for his defensive ability. And I think his age played a factor in why Scottie at that time was no longer able to excel on both ends of the floor during the game. In Pippen's prime, I consider his prime like 1990. You can say 91, but I'd say 1991 to about 1995 into 96. Scottie could score and excel on defense. By this time, Scottie was still a very good defensive player, probably the Bulls' best defensive player in the second three-peat, but he expelled so much energy on defense that at that age, it affected his offense a lot. And that's why a lot of times Scottie's best games came against, subpar teams, or it came against teams where he didn't have to expend so much energy defensively. Oftentimes, a lot of those poor Western Conference teams at the time, like the Warriors, the Kings, teams of that nature. So Dennis Rodman was 36, 37 years old, which is absolutely ancient for an all-star, but he still was putting up big numbers. I think he averaged 16 rebounds a game in 97, 98. And the Bulls won 62 games. Then you had the Utah Jazz with Karl Malone and John Stockton. Karl Malone was 35 years old. John Stockton, I believe, was 36 years old. All right, but John Stockton could still one of the best point guards in the NBA. He was just 1 or 2 seasons removed from his long streak of leading the NBA in assists. I think it was like a 9-year streak or something like that, where he led the NBA in assists for so long. I can't remember how long the streak was. It was a long time. It might have been like 8 or 9 or 7 years or something like that. But it stopped. It was snapped after the '96 season. I believe in '96, '97, Mark Jackson of the then Denver Nuggets led the NBA in assists, and then '97, '98, I believe it was Rod Strickland of the Washington Bullets at the time. '96, '97 was still the Bullets. The next year they became the Wizards. But Utah Jazz tied the Bulls with the best record in the NBA, 62-20, and like I said, you had those two guys. You had Austin, his name was Austin Carr. He was like in his late 30s. You had a lot of older guys on that team. You had some young talent too, because you have to have young guys to mix in with the older guys too. Got to have some young legs, but still, predominantly these teams were older. The Indiana Pacers. Reggie Miller at that time was 32, 33 years old. Not exactly young. Chris Mullen was, 35, on the downside of his career, but still a great spot-up shooter. But he was no longer the 25 points per game scorer that he was in the Run TMC days. The Davis boys were north of 30 now. They no longer were young guys, but they weren't exactly old either. And Rick Smith, even he was past 30 years old. So like I said, this team was older. And then in 98, Mark Jackson returned to the Indiana Pacers. And Mark Jackson is one of the more underrated point guards. Mark Jackson really improved those Pacer teams. And you can see the difference with the Pacers when Mark Jackson came back in 97, 98. And Mark Jackson himself was over 30 years old. Then you have the Houston Rockets. All right, the Houston Rockets, they won back-to-back titles in 94, 95. But after 95, the Rockets lost some key personnel. And unfortunately, the Rockets sort of lost their edge, man. They played uneven basketball. They had the dream run in the playoffs in 95 where everything just came together for them. But by 96, some of the guys were getting older that were on the Rockets. And I also believe that not only were some of the guys getting older, one of the things that hurt the Rockets were their backcourt was kind of small. And they no longer, Kenny the Jet Smith was no longer the Jet. Olajuwon was still great in 95, 96, but he was starting to suffer from, I remember Achilles tendonitis, which would start plaguing him more and more, and start to have little nagging injuries that would cause him to miss games. But the Rockets in 96 in all season got Charles Barkley, who himself was an aging superstar, but he was trying to win a championship, trying to have the best opportunities possible because the Phoenix Suns were starting to go downhill themselves, and they went from winning a league best 62 games in the 92-93 season to only going 500 and losing in the first round, I believe, to the San Antonio Spurs, if I remember serving correctly, in the 96 playoffs, I think it was. So Barkley was no longer, at that age, willing to be part of a rebuilding process team. He wanted to be on the winner, and he was traded to the Houston Rockets. And people forget, and I'll bring up Ticket TV because he mentioned this in his podcast, his live stream, I call it a podcast, that he did a couple of days ago. The Houston Rockets in 96-97 finished 57-25, but that record is misleading. They really, if they had held it together, because age hurt that team a little bit, injuries. Barkley only played 53 games that year. Olajuwon missed a lot of games that year, if I'm not mistaken. They started off the year 21-2, and they were on pace to win well over 60 ball games, but injuries held them back a little bit. And age played a factor to an extent because there were a few games now where the Rockets looked old. But for the most part, they were a great team to watch. And if you watch the triumvirate of Olajuwon, Barkley, and Drexler, I remember Eddie Johnson was on the bench. He was one of the oldest guys in the league. He was like 37, 38 years old, but still was an effective bench player. I remember one playoff game he went off for like 31 points coming off the bench. But you can't help but wonder if that team was just a little bit younger. Like if this was like the 1992 or 1993 versions of themselves, they probably would have roared to an NBA title. But still, they were still a very good team. And then you had the Knicks. In 97, they were great. They won 57 games. In 98, Patrick Ewing finally was really starting to see the ravages of age. And that Knicks team in 98 just wasn't the same. If I'm not mistaken, I think in a regular season game, Ewing injured his hand. I think it came in December of 97, if I remember serves correctly. It might have been against the Bucks. Not certain about that, but that kind of reminisces in my head. And, but the point is, the best teams in the NBA were the older teams. These teams knew how to win. These teams had so much experience. Most of the guys that were on these teams had so much playoff experience, so much overall NBA experience, that they just overwhelmed a lot of younger, perhaps in retrospect, some of the younger teams had a little bit more talent, but they didn't know how to win. And there were young guys in the league. There was Allen Iverson. There was Kevin Garnett. In 97, 98, it was Tim Duncan. It was it was some younger guys. Excuse me. Shaquille O'Neal, Penny Hardaway, Grant Hill. It was a plethora of all-stars and superstars in the NBA at the time. Jason Kidd. But these guys at that time did not really have the talent around them, and they didn't have the experience to succeed in a deep playoff run. And one other thing I want to note, too, that I noticed about having older teams in the league, it's a copycat league. Everybody want to copycat off the Warriors. Everybody wants to shoot threes now. At that time, by most of the best teams being older, you had more of a half-court, slowed down pace. And you saw that in the NBA. You noticed that league scoring went way down after 1996. It went way down for a couple of years. And a lot of that, to me, is due to copycat, the copycat league. Some of that was also had to do with the three-point line being pushed back again from 22 feet from the start of 94-95 season to being pushed back towards the original distance of 20.